It's an important topic, and that's why we brought in to talk about these recommendations psychiatrist Dr. Eric French. So we've been chatting up about this right away because I think so many of us feel like things have changed. Why is this move to a screening so critical?
I think because of the burden, right? This is such a prevalent disorder. And so many people are struggling with how to manage that. And, you know, as we've seen with the pandemic, you know, this completely transformed landscape. And even if you weren't anxious, you were then.
Yeah.
Right? And so trying to manage that in the aftermath and cope and still, you know, progress this is very important, but it's not always being caught.
So the idea, I think, in many ways is that many Americans see a doctor. Very few Americans go to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or someone who might be able to help them with mental health. So the idea is to maybe open that window a little bit to create that opportunity for diagnosis and direction.
Yeah, one would hope that that's the outcome, certainly, because I think sometimes people would like to speak to their doctors about these things, but if they're not asked, they won't bring it up on their own.
Sure.
Right.
But certainly if the door is open and the opportunity is created to sort of discuss that, then hopefully people will be a little bit more forthcoming.
Are MDs ready to handle this? Are the doctors that we visit, are they ready for this? This is another thing we're putting on their plate, isn't it?
They're absolutely ready to handle it. They're brilliant. It is a lot, right? And the hope is that we are adding more mental health providers to the force so that the disparity between the number of patients who need help and the number of providers isn't so horrible, because the MDs need to be able to hand them off and not try to manage this all by themselves, like with everything they have going on.
And we were just talking about the generational differences because, and frankly, just most of our young teenagers and 20-somethings, they're fully aware and sometimes eager to talk about mental health in a different way than anyone past the age 40. So this is kind of reaching out and trying to get them. Why does an early diagnosis or catching this early matter?
I think because if you learn how to cope with this on the early side, then you don't end up with as many issues later on down the road, right? Because if you have unmitigated anxiety, remember, this can infiltrate everything: your occupation, your relationships with family, your intimate relationships. And so if those things go unchecked and no anxiety is recognized, and somebody's irritable, they're tense, they're changing, right? And so it can really affect a lot of things.
Sadly, I'm hearing that one of the biggest problems right now is that people are looking for help and they can't find it.
Yeah.
The volume of people looking for help and the volume of people available to help is a bad ratio right now. Is there any idea of how that'll ever get managed?
I don't know, because there's a statistic floating around that at some point soon here we're going to be looking at a 15,000 physician shortage in the field of psychiatry because of all of the people who are nearing retirement.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be a huge push to get people, you know, graduated into psychiatry and add to this force.
Yeah,
You're
so
absolutely
true, so true. And you really do talk about long-term impact. And when you were talking about it, I just thought of all the athletes, some of these really prominent athletes I've talked about anxiety and how important that is, but you got to connect with somebody to cope.
Yes.
To cope.
Is there a window that anybody should turn to if they're watching right now and say, I need a little help? Is there a website or something you want to recommend to people?
Yeah, well, certainly we are seeing new patients at Mind Spa, so certainly mindspadenver.com. But any website that you go to, Mayo Clinic, you know, the National Institute of Mental Health, they all offer great information as to what are the symptoms, right? How can I manage this a little bit on my own while I do connect with help? Yeah. And that stuff is very valuable.
Well, it's been great to talk with you about it, Dr.
Really?
French.
Likewise.
Hopefully some people were able to find a way forward, and we'll see what happens with this new recommendation about the MDs and their screening as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right.